Welcome to the EARS webinar. My name is Brian Olmstead. We'll do introductions here in a minute with all of the four of us here at the USBE, but first I want to turn some time over to Amanda Charlesworth. She is our webinar host. She's going to go over some housekeeping rules that will make this an enjoyable experience.
Good afternoon, this is Amanda Charlesworth. Just wanted to let you know as you're logging in, you'll want to go ahead and mute your computers or choose to log in without audio. Also, at the top of the screen, you can see the share menu. If you click share, you will be sharing your live screen. Be careful because we've had experiences where student information has been accidentally shared just by sharing your screen. Did it get better?
Yeah,
one of us was unmuted. Yeah. Okay. So if you have any questions during today's webinar, there's a chat box on the right menu. You might have to open your drop down to get the chat to open. And you can email the group and share comments, or you can email me privately if you have questions, and I'll relay them to the presenters as we move through the presentation. Thank you, and I'll turn the time back over to Brian.
All right. So my name is Brian Olmstead. I'm a coordinator here at the Utah State Board of Education. I have adult education, youth in custody, and the Enhancement for At-Risk Students programs. Those are all under my watch. And here with me today in the room is Rita Brock, our education specialist, and Marilee Wendell, our auditor. And we also have Amanda. So I wanted to start with a fun quote. So Mark Twain said, "Get your facts first, and you can distort them as you please." So we're going to share a few facts about EARS funding and kind of the development recently of changes, both statute and in board rule. And then we hope we don't distort them too much, but we'll see what happens. So the agenda for our afternoon will be changes to legislation, changes to board rule, and our main board rule is this R277708. And then we wanted to highlight some LEA responsibilities as well as talk about our own responsibilities. So in the 2018 legislative session, we felt like EARS was a highlight for lots of people. 3 different pieces of legislation addressed the Enhancement for At-Risk Students program. And so you can see the summary here. So Senate Bill 145 added 2 elements to the list of criteria. So chronic absenteeism and homelessness were added to the existing 4. And the other thing that the Senate Bill 145 did is it allowed every student to be counted up to 3 times. This is a change where prior to that they were only counted once, regardless of the number of criterion that they met. House Bill 132, this was the Juvenile Justice Amendment. House Bill 132 added the 3 words, including addressing truancy. So this is when we start talking about how we can spend the EARS money, we can now spend it to address truancy. So that's where House Bill 132
You have some headphones?
came in.
I just want to see if it'll work if I plug in.
And the third one is Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 2 is often known as it's like the bill of bills. It's the large, and sometimes it's one or two, but so it's the funding. It's where the allocation, and this is where they changed the amount for gang prevention and intervention. So this is a carve out right off the top of the EARS allocation, and it was increased to $1.5 million this year. So that was the legislative changes made to the Enhancement for At-Risk Students program. So the details of the distribution. So we're gonna talk about before and after the legislative session. So prior, 4% base, 20% was distributed to high poverty schools. A high poverty school is a school that has a free and reduced lunch count of 75% or higher. And so the list of those high poverty schools throughout the state, 20% of the allocation goes directly as a distribution to the schools. And so then the remaining amount, 76%, was a non-duplicated count based upon the 4 criterion that you see on the screen there. And so the change is that 2 elements were added, like we noted before, chronic absenteeism and homelessness, but also now it's a duplicated count up to 3 times. So this is the formula used in this office to determine the allocation that comes to each one of your LEAs. I want to talk about changes to the board rule. So because of legislative action, that necessitates board rule change, as well as we here in the office have the opportunity through the board committees and different work to address changes in board rule that we feel are a benefit to the program. One of those that happened this last year is an LEA through their own governing board. You can now approve a local definition of a student at risk of academic failure. The rule prior to that defined those students as only a student who had failed to demonstrate proficiency. So in our 1, 2, 3, 4 proficiency assessment world, I hope that's familiar to everybody. We didn't want to give, we're assuming an informed audience. So if we need to clarify that, throw that into the chat. But so 1, 2, so 3 and 4 are proficient, 1 and 2 are not proficient. The only definition of a student at risk of academic failure was a student who had performed below proficient on a statewide assessment. What has been added to that now is a local board can now make their own definition of a student at risk of academic failure. This is a big change in board rule. And along with that, in order to, again, come in compliance with statute, is an LEA may use funds for activities that support those students, including addressing truancy. And so that was the House Bill 132 language, and that now is represented or reflected in board rule as well. And the last board rule change is in the application, each LEA needs to include a copy of their student classroom management, school discipline plans. So this is actually a different board rule. I believe it's 277609. Let me confirm that. For someone here can help me. We're finding it. Yes, it's 609. So R277609 requires LEAs to prepare this plan. We are now asking for a copy of that plan along with the plan for the use of these dollars, trying to connect that work to bring that together in a comprehensive way. That you wouldn't have one plan talking about activities and then have a different plan talking about a different set of activities, and then they come together in the school, and everyone's wondering, well, what are we supposed to do? So this could be the funding source to help implement that plan. And that brings us to some LEA conversations. So the LEA responsibilities, and we kind of formed these in some Q&A. So why create an LEA definition? Giving you a moment to read that. If you want to help students who are, let's say, beyond the definition of having not performed proficient on a statewide assessment, your opportunity to do that within this structure is by creating an LEA definition. And that is this is an if-then statement. If you have done that, then you will be able to use these funds to help students in that situation. And we're going to show you some examples of that. A big one that's being talked about right now is truancy. So if you were to create an LEA definition of students at risk of academic failure, and you were to include truant behavior in that definition, that would allow you to help, that would allow you to use these funds to help any truant student. Now, you might not want to say the first truant, like absence. You might want to, I know the habitually truant language is typically 10 absences.
And then I get in there and I did have, you specify 11.
You may not want to go, to that degree, to wait until 10 in order to help them. So within your local definition, you would want to set that mark, and then that creates an allowance for these funds to be spent for an activity that would help those students. The other example here is English language proficiency. So with our English learners, you may have an LEA definition that includes their proficiency levels. And because you feel like maybe a student that's scoring on a 3, and I'll have Rita shake her head if I'm going right here with that.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, so if they're 3 and you're hoping to use these funds to have activities that support your English learners of a certain proficiency level, you would want to have that again as part of your local definition. And the reason this is important is because, again, the only definition that exists right now without you choosing to make a local definition is a student at risk of academic failure is one who has shown themselves to be not proficient, so a 1 or a 2, on a statewide assessment. And that then becomes, if you leave that definition as the definition of the student population that you're going to serve with these funds, that becomes a very specific subset of your total student group. And I'm going to say, I'm going to go, I'll use an example that's a little ridiculous, but it's easy math. So if my school was a school of 10 students, and 4 of my students last year on the state assessments were not proficient. They scored 1s or 2s. The other six kids were all 3s and 4s. I would only be able to spend this money on activities that directly support the 4 students who failed to prove themselves proficient on that statewide assessment. Unless I had gone in front of my local board and we had approved all together, collectively and through the LEA board process, our own local definition of what a student at risk of academic failure means. And then if I have a local definition, I now can spend my EARS funding to support that population of whatever is defined by my local definition. LEA Responsibilities Continued. So what needs to be in my plan? So right now, the EARS plan is still in the UCA, so the Utah Consolidated Application process. It's part of that consolidated plan. The goals will be connected to that broad LEA plan, that comprehensive plan. You will need to submit that in the UCA again, as usual. A copy of the discipline plan that we spoke of earlier. And then if you choose to, as an elective item in your plan, you would give us your specific definition, and you would include proof of the LEA board approval. That could be minutes of the board meeting where they approved that, as board action. Looks like we have a question.
So I can see the hand raised on the system, but it's not saying who it is.
I saw it was Jason. Oh, and I just saw another. We're trying to figure this out. So I've got 3 raised hands. I think if you have a question, please type it into the chat box. Should be on the right-hand side of the screen. And it should go to Amanda, and then she will read the question over the air so that everybody can hear it, and then we'll answer it. So I hope. Are there some fast typers out there?
I can't see it. Okay.
Do we have some coming
I have a
in?
question.
Okay, so here's our first question.
So will we submit this in the UCA this year?
Yes. Yes, the UCA plan, not the fiscal elements in the UCA will not be present. The planning tool will be used in the UCA. The fiscal is all moving to utahgrants.gov. And so we will use the planning tool in the UCA. The EARS plan will still be part of the UCA submission that is due November 1st. Do we have, that's our, okay. So I put this slide in, and it's not the question format of the others, but so preparation for next year. I want to set the stage
One more came in.
for the fall. Oh, we have a question.
So
Okay.
another question, do we need to have our local definition prior to November 1?
Yes. It has to be with the plan.
So Rita's telling us, yes, that will need to be submitted with your plan.
And I want to, so to have an approved plan, you would need if the local definition would need to be approved. If you're okay, if you're in the process of getting that definition and your plan needs to be extended, it just would not be approved until that is in, which means you would, you're going to have your distribution as a 1/12 already. It's just,
But until I approve it, the distribution doesn't start. So if they don't submit it to me until March, they're not going to get any funding.
so funding will flow once you have an approved plan.
So 2 more questions, Brian.
Okay.
First one, when will the UCA be ready to use? It is not currently open or updated. That's our first question. Second one, if we do not use the local method, then no plan is required, correct?
It's elective.
Okay, I want to answer the second question first. If you choose to not use a local definition, a plan for this money is still necessary. It's still a requirement. So you have to have an approved plan for EARS. The optional part is creating a local definition of what at risk or students at risk of academic failure. So everybody needs a plan. Everyone needs to be in the UCA. Now, when will the UCA be open? Have we heard? Okay.
Yes, we talked this morning with John, and it's supposed to happen in the next couple of weeks.
So I had originally heard September 1st. Sounds like we had conversation this morning with those in charge of UCA in the building here. They're hoping within a couple weeks. All I can say is when it's open, we'll let you know. You'll probably know through lots of different channels as well. And I have no control over that. I'm sorry. I do want everyone to know I was on the other side of this conversation for 20 years. I remember when we started the UCA, and at the time, it was crazy days, but we got used to it. It was a nice system at one point. We're transitioning. I think utahgrants.gov will be a great tool as it becomes fully functional and in place. It's just going to take a while. We're going to have some transition time. Questions? Yeah.
Okay, so just tell them.
You can talk. They're listening to you.
I thought I was mute. Hello, everybody. This is Rita. Okay, so let me just tell you 2 important factors about the UCA. So don't panic, because those that are already used to the UCA, as we have been doing it for the last 7-8 years, go ahead and keep doing what you have been doing. And you can also cut and paste. You're allowed to do that. Now, the other element is we are going to send you the PowerPoint. And if you have any other question, just let me know.
So then a couple more from online. One question is, the state has to approve the local definition before we can take this to our local school board?
No, there's we are staying out of your local definition.
Okay.
So but it has to be approved by your local board. So that's the approval process. So my thought is you would want to develop that collectively with administration, school level, district level, parent feedback, teacher feedback, however you come together with that definition, and then take it to the local board, and it needs to be approved.
One more comment was to repeat the fiscal deadline.
November 1st.
So November 1st.
The fiscal deadline, so the application deadline is November 1st.
I think that's
I think the fiscal deadline would be that money flows after you have an approved plan.
So one more. We have a school disciplinary policy, but we have more to do, or we need to do more and add to it to meet the classroom management part, correct?
I can't answer that specifically without looking at your plan, but it needs to be in place. It's actually it's a separate board rule. It might be that you need to give us your current version and let us, in your plan, you could say that it's being worked on. What we would hope to see and what we need attached to the EARS plan is a copy of your board-approved discipline plan. Now, in its current state, our board rules are constantly being revised. And so all we can do is publish the current version. And I know that's LEAs typically have the same process, that you have your current version of your rules, your policies, and there are constantly a number of them that are in review and being edited, modified. And so we would expect the same process that's going on. So you would provide for us the current plan that is in place and effective in your LEA.
So in addition, it says, is there going to be a specific format or template for this plan, or are we free to come up with one and attach it to the UCA?
Okay, this plan, I'm thinking you're saying the EARS plan is that's an assumption, that this plan.
Let's ask.
So if it's the EARS, the UCA has the elements of the EARS plan.
So all you have to do is just fill it in.
Yeah.
And like
And
I
it's
said,
no
you can
change,
cut-
no
yeah,
change from last year.
No, it's exactly the same.
Yeah. So the EARS plan is built in the UCA and it has its element. Do you remember how many?
Yes, there.
I want to say 4 or 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions about the UCA, you can call me, or you can also call Kelly Smith. She does the technical part if you need help into uploading any documents or any information. But we are here, we're open.
Access.
Yes, and to get access for the new business administrator or new charter schools. So, and when we will send the PowerPoint and the survey, we will also include Kelly Smith contact and also John McQuarrie.
So kind of an add-on to this is another question that says, is this a new requirement to have classroom management in the district plan?
Yes, it is. So that was one of the changes to board rule. I guess I could go back to, well, that's quite a ways back. So changes to the board rule. The third bullet there is that now part of the EARS plan needs to include a copy of the classroom management and school discipline plan. So that is a change for this year.
And for those that want to read it into another board rule, it is board rule section R277-609-4. And that will give you an idea of how to set up your plan if you don't have one in place already.
Yeah, so that's the board rule that speaks to that plan specifically. So I'm gonna go back to this preparation for next year. So with a lot of action on EARS, things are changing with the legislative change, the board rule change. So it's kind of a reset. And so this year is our time to prepare for next year. And so establishing the subset of your total population that's identified as at risk of academic failure, that's going to be important because it's changing from practices in years past where that population has been I'm going to say, loosely defined by the criterion used to distribute the money. Well, the population in board rule is clearly, again, only students who have failed to show proficiency on a statewide assessment, or if you choose to make a local definition. So either one, we're establishing this new group of eligible students that we can fund activities with these dollars. Establishing a baseline measurement. So part of the obligation in the plan has always been to establish goals and then show improvement on the goals. The EARS funding has kind of a ticking, not a ticking bomb, that's a bad way to think of it, but there's a countdown clock. How about that? We have about 3 years to establish a baseline and then show improvement that these dollars applied to a specific population have effected change. And so identify, enact, monitor interventions, and then use those dollars appropriately on that population with the activities, the interventions that you have selected, and we would hope after time then to show improvement, again, based on the baseline measurement. So this next program year, the one we're in now, the 18-19 school year, is a pretty important year for EARS because it's establishing it gives us room to establish all of this, that then over the next, I want to say 3 years, we can start showing, and when we report back to the legislature, we'll have our data, we'll have our list of different interventions. We don't want to get descriptive in what you do. We just want to be able to show, LEA selected, intervention A, LEA selected intervention B. These are the results, the movement off the baseline. Hopefully, possibly a decrease in the total population, right? Or not the total population, but a decrease in the subset of students who were identified at risk. And we would just show movement. We'd be able to show, I want to be careful saying cause and effect, because certainly there's lots of other things that are, taking a part in the student's life, but we would be able to show that the EARS funding was targeted to a population for specific interventions, and these measurements, we moved the needle.
Another question from online.
Okay.
When will the LEA allocations be sent out? And it's actually a two-parter. When and will the schools be notified of the amount of EARS funding for fiscal year 19?
So EARS funding is an LEA distribution. So back in March, business administrators have received the allocation to each LEA. So the LEA has the allocation.
The estimated, because they will adjust, I think, for the ones, they do a final when they submit it into the UCA. I think for the one school that closed, that if there is any tiny adjustment that needs to be made.
Okay, so right, because back in March, there is a school that is now closed,
Yes.
right? And so, right, the grand total,
Make a slight adjustment.
a very slight adjustment.
But I have a question for the audience. So those of you that are business administrator, have you received the email from Jamie specifying the exact amount that you will get, or the approximate amount that you will get for this school year, 18-19? If you have not received it, please send me an email and I will send you the estimated amount that you will get for this year.
And the amount was published in the legislative estimate book.
That was, yeah,
And
a
Jamie
long time ago.
Jamie
Yeah.
said she did send it in May, I think.
Yeah.
But if you have not received it, or if there is a change in BAs, please contact me. I'll be happy to give you your amount.
Ed was asking about how to, can you read
It
that?
says, when and how will schools be notified as to the amount of ERS funding being awarded for the fiscal year?
Okay, so that is, it's an LEA specific issue. That's a question that needs to go to your LEA. So if you are here today as a school representative, you would need to talk to your LEA and talk about the ERS distribution to your school. Because the dollars go to the LEA, and how the LEA distributes between their schools or between their student populations and all of the different things that can happen in an LEA, it's as varied as the number of LEAs we have. There's no state direction that it needs to be done a certain way. And so we have almost 160 LEAs now in Utah. So there could be 160 different ways to distribute the money. The money is distributed to the LEA, and then the LEA then makes that decision on how those dollars are used. And so I can't answer down to the school level on what any one school might see in ERS funding.
Probably the question was from a charter school.
But as for the LEA level, it basically, they will upload the amounts according to the formula that Brian described, and it will be uploaded into the UCA. You will go and once your plan is approved, the money will start to flow. It goes on a 1/12 basis and will automatically flow to the LEA.
So let's talk about our responsibilities here. And we wanted to talk about the timeline of, as the formula, which was changed by legislation, including, remember, they added 2 new criterion, and they added that a student can be counted up to 3 times. So the question often is, well, how does that work into, the money that an LEA receives? And so on the screen, the flow is to use the most recent complete data set. So right now, an example would be the 17-18 school year has ended, right? June 30th, 2018 was the last program day of that school year. That data,
I'll come there.
that data is still being finalized. I guess that's, the best way to say that. So once that complete school year data set is available, that data set would be applied to the March 2019 legislative session. Will determine an allocation amount. And to use round figures, 38 million basically last year. And so if they put 38 million into the ERS funding, we would use the 17-18 school year data applied to that dollar amount following that 4%. Well, first you have to carve off 1.5 million. Remember our gang prevention. And then 4%, 20%, and 76%. And that would determine then the LEA allocation for the 19-20 school year. So the 18-19 funding available this year was determined by the 16-17 data set using the March 2018 legislative session. So that's the flow of kind of the timeline of that formula. The other thing we want to talk about here is we do have an obligation, again, statute and board rule kind of puts this in our wheelhouse of monitoring. The EARS program is on a triennial monitoring. And what we look at is we look at the appropriate use of funds in the activities selected and funded, right? Those interventions that we've talked about. And again, those interventions are going to be tied to the subset of the total student population that either you've identified by letting the state definition be your definition or by creating a local definition. So that will determine your activities, and then you've used those funds directly for those activities, directly for those students, and then we'll be talking about the outcomes. We haven't, in our monitoring to date, we haven't discussed with programs the outcomes idea. And that's, again, when we talked about setting a baseline this year, this will be the future of our monitoring. We'll get into the outcomes. You know, what type of measurements are we seeing? Are we seeing movement in either the population, within the population, within their results? Are they moving to proficiency? Are ones moving to twos? Are twos moving to, threes, hopefully becoming proficient, fours, and, and all. And so our outcomes will become part of the monitoring. But so those are the elements of the triennial monitoring. We are required to see, and I should be careful saying see, because some of our monitoring is desk monitoring. You're probably aware of that, many of you, that we're reaching out to you. It's impossible for us to visit 1/3 of the LEAs in the state every year. And so some have on-site monitoring visits, others have desk monitoring through email and phone calls and just conversations like that. This is my kind of concluding fun quote. I think Marilee found these quotes for us. But, so yeah, progress is man's ability to complicate simplicity. I like that. And that's, I hope that's not the future of what we're doing with EARS. I hope we are trying to create flexibility with the LEA definitions. I think flexibility created through legislative action in terms of, students counting multiple times, addressing truancy specifically, things that, we're trying to open up the possibilities of what we do with our EARS funding. However, at the same time, we're going to require some things that we haven't in the past, so that we're all guided, down this journey in a good way. That if you've created an LEA definition, then that should then identify a subset of your total population. You can pick interventions and activities, and you can fund those interventions and activities. But what we want to see, well, we don't want to see any of it. So we want to see a reduction in EARS funding being spent on general population, because at the end of the day, this is a targeted. It's a targeted allocation. It is meant to work for students of a specific definition. And that's what we all need to work on, that is putting all of those pieces together so that we can show the efficacy of the dollars. And when we have a legislative report here in
2022.
about 3 years, 3.5 years, we want to be able to close the loop, right? Bring all those things together. So that looks like we have questions.
We do 2 new ones, so I think that we'll go one at a time here. So first one, are you going to give us a list or ideas of appropriate activities?
Well, we are preparing a guide. We are going to have an EARS guide. I think the danger in us doing that completely is that I don't want to box people in. We will probably always have the unallowables, right? So we'll have a list of unallowables. Those just, when we talk education dollars, that's a pretty easy thing to list. What I would hate to do is to have a list of items that will never be complete and make you think that that's all EARS can be used for. So what we're hoping to have is guidance more in philosophy. Basically, if you have an intervention, if you have an activity focused directly to a population that's trying to move the needle of a specific measurement for them, we are not going to tell you that that's bad, because that's exactly what we're looking for. So I guess that's my way of saying kind of, sort of.
So question number 2.
Okay.
Who can we contact if we have specific questions about how this will affect our school specifically?
About how it will affect your school specifically. So that's an interesting question, again, because of EARS funding as an allocation to LEAs, and the plan is an LEA plan. We're not asking to see school plans. Now, charter schools, you typically are the LEA and the school. And so if this is a charter school asking, you are the LEA. And sometimes that's not clearly understood all the time. But so if you are a charter school, a single site charter school, you are the LEA, you are also the school. But if you are in one of the districts, one of the LEAs, the school district, that becomes a complicated question again, because we're not asking to see school-based plans, or we're not asking to have school. Did they add?
They added a comment. It says the reason they ask is because it's a district, half of the district qualifies for at-risk funding.
It's the district's responsibility to distribute the funding.
So if half of the students in the district qualify, and if those students are present in every school, so I'm making some assumptions here. If 50% of your population is going to be the subset that we're talking about, if they are present in every school, I would hope to see EARS funding reaching each of those schools.
Would it be a business?
I'm sorry.
Brian, so just to clarify though, if it's a district, they would probably want to talk to their business administrator about how much each school was going to be issued, or?
No, this is.
It doesn't necessarily, this money may not necessarily flow to the school to spend it. All the money may be kept at the LEA level and spent at the LEA level on personnel that might move. There's so many ways to do it.
But to answer your question really vaguely, you can contact Brian
But yeah, in
Marilee
terms of-
or Rita, we can try to talk through them with you specifically if there's something that you need help with.
Yes, yeah, I forgot to answer that part of the question, was who to contact. Yes, please contact all of us. We will send out an email. So this is being recorded. We will send an email to all of our EARS contacts and all the business administrators. I believe those are our two groups, with a link to the recording, a quick survey on how we can be better and help you, and then all of our contacts, including Kelly Smith's contact as a UCA help.
John McQuarrie. And also we will provide the PowerPoint slides. And that will be coming, again, it might take about a week to get the recordings up in place and provide a link to the recording.
You got a big thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Sorry you have to be fast typers on that, but I think this has been a good way to field questions. They all come to Amanda. Looks like nothing's coming in. Well, thank you for joining us, and we just appreciate all of the work with the at-risk population. And
Can I make a comment
Yes.
on audit? Just from an audit standpoint, when we've been out looking at a district, the more specific if you decide to make a definition, the more specific you make the definition of your at-risk, the harder it is to audit. We ran across a case, and it wasn't one that we audited, but we were looking at that was done by your private auditors. One of the LEAs had put in their plan that they were going to do highly qualified teachers. And so a private auditor had looked at it and actually failed them on a case because they didn't pay a highly qualified teacher, even though that wasn't something that was required out of this state funding. And so we just want to give you kind of a warning. If you make it really specific that way, and that is what your LEA governing board approves, that is how we're going to have to hold you to it. So
don't paint yourself into a corner with your own definition. Be careful. We have a question.
So to add to that, could you share with us a good definition of the LEA at-risk students?
We can get it right off the board. It's any student that is at risk of academic failure. That's the first one. And then if you go by each criteria is English language.
No. So I'm going to say I can't.
that's what they wanted to give you control of.
Yeah, what I would rather do, I don't know who asked that, what I would rather do is have you suggest where you're headed, and please bounce that off of us, and we will help guide, but I would prefer to not send anybody in any one direction, because I don't want you thinking that my definition is the right definition. I want it to be a local definition. And so we are very happy to help you create that definition, but we will want to start with you suggesting something and saying, how does this sound? How does this look? This is what we're thinking.
Just a comment that they really appreciate the flexibility and openness to the innovation.
Great, and that's exactly what we're hoping to see. Hoping to see, the use of flexibility, again, to get this targeted money to a specific population and make some changes in their lives.
And each district, each school had their own unique demographics. And so I highly suggest communication between the business administrator, the program administrators, the counselors, the teachers, and just see where the need lies. And then according to that need and using the data, you could come up with some goals and some strategies and some action steps on how to bring the students to go from being at risk of not graduating to graduate and to continue in life and be productive citizens of our communities.
Yeah, and that same process should inform a definition, because you'll start to identify a population, and so you can create a definition of who are these students at risk of academic failure. And it might be a list of, certain points and things, yeah. All right, one more plea for questions.
Just kudos to you guys for an excellent presentation at the moment.
No tomatoes throwing, you can't throw us tomatoes. That's
It's a great part of a webinar. No tomatoes.
But we're here to help, Marilee, Brian, and myself. If you have any question, we will try to help you. Please keep in mind that the board rule keep changing, and we're trying to update you as the board rule change. And the wish is to have our student become proficient and to stay in school and to guide them to become productive adult. So please call us if you need anything, and we'll try to help you the best we can.
All right. Anything else? Anyone here in the room? Okay. Looks like appreciate the thank yous, and again, appreciate your attendance, and we will talk to you soon. Back to you, Amanda.
Well, thank you all. Like Brian said, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the WebEx, so it will be closing down soon on you guys. Have a great afternoon.